Alright, in our last segment, we put on the top of the 3D printer with the motors included. We did both of the triangle frames, we did the front and the back. Now we're going to start off doing the Y-axis, and this is going to include the the smooth rods, the bearings, the MDF board, and we're also going to go through how to drill that as well. So we're going to take two 400 millimeter smooth rods just to start off with. And I know we talked a little bit about the spacing of these bar clamps earlier, but this is where they're going to become important. So we're going to start off though just by putting in, sliding through a smooth rod, getting it through the middle there. We're going to do one on each side. And then before we connect them through to the other side, we are going to slide two LN8UU linear bearings on either rod. Make sure they go on there smooth. Don't jam them on the rod or else you may lose some of the balls on the inside. But those are on there. We're going to go ahead and push those through all the way to our other bar clamp. Alright. Now, next one. Okay. Our bearings are in there. We're going to worry about those in just a second. This is where these become very important, these rod clamps, because they have to be exactly parallel or else the bed will not slide straight. So basically you're going to want to make sure that both of them are equal distance from the bearing, the 608ZZ bearing, just to ensure that they're parallel. So we're going to use our vernier calipers and do that. It's always good to have that handy. And then we are going to go on to how to trace on the MDF board and make sure that we've drilled all of our holes correctly before mounting it onto the bearings. But we're going to go ahead and even these up. Definitely take your time doing this because it is extremely important to the quality of your prints when we get that far. I can already tell just by looking at these two that they are not parallel. Also, make sure that you don't have them wide enough to where they are too wide for the board to mount on them. You definitely need them close enough for that. So yeah, we're going to go ahead and spend some time doing that. You should do the same, and we'll come back right afterwards. Alright, so we're going to take a second now, after putting on our smooth rods, to go ahead and measure out our MDF board measurements. Now this is going to be what connects the bearings on the smooth rod to the heated bed, and also the belt is going to attach to the bottom of this. So first what we want to do is find our center. Now we know that our MDF board is about 228 millimeters across, so we know that middle is going to be 114. Both ways, so you want to mark that down, and what you see we did here is about 114, and then this way 114. We drilled a hole. Now these are all going to be M3 holes. You might need to drill an M2 just to get a good guide hole going through, but depends on the drill you're using. So we have our hole right in the middle. Now you want to take your your belt clamps, and those are going to look something like this, and about 15 millimeters on either side of the hole. You're going to measure that out. It'll just be shy. Now really it doesn't have to be exact, this one's not as particular, but okay, yeah, from the center hole up into the first portion of the plastic I have about 15 millimeters. And what you're going to do then is just put it in place, mark it, and then do the same exact thing on the other side and mark it. And I've already gone ahead and drilled those holes as well. So we have our 5 here in the center. You also want to grab your heated bed and making sure all sides are even. Go ahead and set that down on the board. You can either eyeball it or just measure it if you're wanting to be extra safe. But basically lay that down and then mark the 4 corners. It actually also has a middle on this one, so you can make sure your middle lines up. And it looks like ours does, so that's always good. So there's that. Now you want to basically measure 50 millimeters from either side of the MDF board. And we're going to do this because when you see your bearings here sliding, you're going to want the bed to be able to overhang a little bit because these are what's going to hit the bar clamps over here. And so we want to keep these at least 50 millimeters away just to give the bed the full range of motion that we'll need for the printer. So I've already drawn the square here, but basically all you have to do is measure 5 in, mark, and then do it from the other way, mark it down, do it on both ends, connect the lines, and you're good on that one. So now we know that somewhere within this square, 50 millimeters in on either side, is where our bearing bushings are going to go. So we're going to go ahead and take our printer right over here and flip it over. And you'll see that I've already attached 3 of the 4 bearing guides needed. All we're going to do is use zip ties to connect those. They're one of the many things held together by zip ties in the RepRap design. So we'll do that really fast. Just get that through. Make sure the bearing is set in place. And here we are. Alright, so you want to do that for all 4 of them and then just cut away your extra slack. Alright, now you want the printer to just go ahead and mount. So we will flip these underside, that way we can see on the top end our measurements. And hold up your board with the square. And make sure that on the front and back end, the sides doesn't matter if it's 50 as much. Make sure that all 4 are lined up. I'm going to go ahead and move this forward so you can see it better. Make sure that all 4 are lined up within that box on the front and back end. And then use your pen to mark their spots. Make sure they're all parallel. Again, if your lines are drawn correctly, you should be able to just eyeball this one to make sure they're parallel. So we're going to need to adjust that one there. So this looks about right. We'll go ahead and mark our holes. Set that aside. Now we're going to drill those holes and all of the others that need finished drilling. And then we will move into putting on the MDF board. Alright, now that we've drilled all of our holes on the lines we drew, we're going to go ahead and mount this onto the bearing mounts that we attached earlier with the zip ties. And it's a pretty straightforward task. We're just going to set these up here, poke one through, and then just kind of slide in the other ones just to make sure that your holes are lined up. And also this will hold it into place better when you're screwing in the nuts. So do that. And then it looks like, yep, these all lined up perfectly. So we'll be able to tighten the nuts and continue on with the rest of the printer afterwards. We're going to go ahead and mount the bed right after this. That way we're not trying to do it later on. So I have all of these in. The MDF board will stay on there now, most likely, while I try and screw in the nuts. So yep, we'll be back to mount the bed right after we tighten these up. Alright, now that we have our MDF board secured onto the bearings and it's sliding, smoothly, you want to make sure that it slides correctly, there's no catches in the bars. We are going to need next our two belt clamps with the M3 nuts cut inside of them. And just kind of push those in there with whatever you have handy. We are going to need a GT2 belt cut to about 90 centimeters, but you can cut off the extra slack after you're done. We need a GT2 pulley and NEMA 17 stepper motor, and we've already gone here, as you can see, and attached that. Basically, you want to make sure that the teeth of the pulley match up with the bearing over here on the front of the axis. So make sure that's nice and secure, put that on there. Put in your nuts inside of your belt clamps, get your belt ready, and we're going to secure those to the MDF board in these two holes we drilled on either side of the center hole with M3 20mm bolts. So what we're going to do now is flip over the entire printer and secure the frame, or secure the belt. Alright, so we're going to go ahead and do it like this. And start off by putting down one end of the belt, teeth facing up. You'll see on the bottom of the belt clamp there's this grooves. That's not actually extra support material, that's to hold the teeth in. So just like that, basically. Anywhere you want. Just make sure you don't cover up the center hole where later our thermistor is going to go through. But you're going to need to feel around for the hole and tighten that in. Alright, we're going to do the next side now. Now we're going to have to go back and tighten these just to make sure that it's completely in there. There we are. Alright, let me flip it over real fast because this part has to be very tight if we are going to tug on the belt. We can't afford to have it slip out midway. And these need to go all the way through because otherwise they might hit the bed once you mount the bed on top. Just make sure you don't pull out the bolt on the other side, or the nut. Alright, next one. Okay, so now we're flipping it back over. We've got our belt tightened. You can pull on it just to make sure. Alright, so you can pull it all the way to the extreme. Wrap the belt around. Make sure it goes under the bars here. Okay. There we are. Then wrap it around the bearing on the opposite side. And this is where you want to make sure that it's wrapped around the teeth tightly, otherwise it's going to be loose in the end. Make sure there's no twists in it. Pull it tightly around, and let's see if the bars aren't in the way here. But basically you're going to use your other belt clamp that we have and clamp it down exactly like it is on the other side after making sure that it's all tight. But after we get to that, we're going to check it and then mount our bed. Alright, so now we're going to do the heat bed soldering. It's a really simple process. You'll notice the heat bed on two sides. One side has the heating element lines are fairly visible, If you flip it over, it's completely smooth. You can't see any markings underneath. And this is your top side. So we're going to be soldering on the bottom, the part that has the lines on it. You'll see on the bottom there's a 1, 2, and 3 spot. And then here, you'll see them labeled plus, minus, minus. So for this, we're going to need our heat bed, our soldering iron, our soldering wire, 2 black 18 gauge wires, and 1 white. We're going to use the 2 blacks for negative and the white for a positive. So, very simply, we are just going to go ahead and solder these on. These wires are bigger, so it'll take a little bit more than the previous ones to get stuck on there tightly. Now these wires will be moving with the bed, so you want to make sure they're tight on there. We do not want them to come off. Alright, there's one done. Then we'll move on to the next. Negative wire. Might be easier to twist these off, as I'm sure you don't with the other wires. Okay, that one's on there, and we'll move on to the final positive, the white wire on number 1 spot. Lay it down. Stick it on. Easy as that. Now these are going to go into your ramps board, and then next we're going to show you how to wire the power supply and then assemble all the electronics together. Alright, we just soldered the 2 negatives and 1 positive wire on the back of the heat bed. Now we're going to attach the thermistor. This is going to relay back to the computer what the bed temperature is, and this will help you regulate it and adjust it during your prints. So for this part, we're going to need our heat bed, a little bit of Kapton tape, the thermistor, and some 22 gauge wire. Now, first we are going to go ahead and split our 22 gauge wire and solder it to both ends of the thermistor. And this will allow it to read from both sides. Then we're going to take the other end of the 2 wires, crimp it with our DuPont crimpers, and put it in a 2-pin wire connector. And basically this, you can actually tape it anywhere you want on the back of the heat bed. It's more advisable to do it closer to the center, since that's where most of your prints are going to be centrally located. But all you have to do is peel off your Kapton tape, and tape this wherever you see fit. And there we are. Now we are ready to mount the heat bed and move on. I have here the MDF board completely mounted onto the YAxis bars. And now we're going to place the bed on there, but first we went ahead and soldered the wires onto the bed. We have 1 positive, white, And then 2 and 3 are 2 negative wires black, and we went ahead and used our 18 gauge wire for this. Also, we have our thermistor. On either end of it, we soldered in 22 gauge wire, and then left those extended out here. We're going to eventually crimp these and put them into a 2-pin Molex connector so they can go on the ramps board, but for now they're fine to be just left how they are. And we taped the entire thing to the center of the heated bed. Now really it doesn't matter where this goes on the heated bed, but since most of your prints are going to be done in the center, it's better to just leave it there. So we're going to flip it over, place it on the MDF board. Your holes should line up as we talked about earlier. And what you're going to need for this is an M3 20mm, a platform spring, and a nut. Oh, yep. But before we do that, we need to feed the 22 gauge wire through that hole we drilled in the middle. And this will allow us to, better maneuver the wire without having it sliding around all the time with the bed. So we need to pull those through, since they will forever be stationary. There we go. Good. And then we can feed these through the back just to get them out of the way for now. Alright, so we are going to put our M3 screw or bolt through there, spring, and all the way through. We're going to wait and tighten that. We'll do the opposite corner now. Bolt, spring, through the MDF board. And we'll go ahead and do it for all of them. Now after you get these tightened, you're going to have to go back later on and level them out. That's not terribly important that it's done immediately, but it will have to be done, and it can be a bit tedious. Alright, last one. Okay, we're good. So we're going to go ahead and tighten the nuts on the back of that. You can either use or don't use washers. It doesn't really matter on the back of here. But yeah, that's our heated bed. We have the lead wires sticking out, so we don't have to worry about soldering those on later. The thermistor is pushed through the hole in the middle of the MDF board. And we can tighten these up and continue with our X and Z axis.